Hello Steelers, and welcome to this video which I'm going to show you how I painted these 18mm French chasseurs à cheval. These are by AB Miniatures from Australia. I bought them from Eureka Miniatures here in the UK, and I got enough for sharp practice. This is enough for two groups in sharp practice, so there's 16 in total, and I'm going to take you through the steps I took to paint these figures. So let's get started. First things first is a bit of research, and I use for this the Saint-Jours 1815 website. This is a French website which has been created by one chap, and he's basically traced all the uniforms for the 1815 campaign. I'll put a link to it in the description below, but this is well worth using. I just looked for the chasseurs à cheval in the French units, picked out the 1st regiment, and then checked out their uniforms. And as you can see here, each of the regiments and the squadrons have a full colour plate, should I say, of their uniforms that you can use perfectly well when you're painting your figures. And as for painting, the very first thing I did was prime these in white because I want the colours to be quite bright so they can be seen on the tabletop. This was just with the rattle can, but you could use anything you want, like an airbrush, even hand paint them with a brush yourself, but I just did them all in white so I can also see all the details. And I just started block painting in green. This is Vallejo's intermediate green. Again, I will put descriptions and links for all the paints that I use in this down below, so you'll be able to just find those quite easily on Amazon or elsewhere. And I just simply block painted in all the green uniform here. You don't have to be particularly neat. One thing to say is that when I'm painting for the tabletop, so I'm adhering to the 3-foot rule, which is basically me seeing these from 3 feet away during a game. So I'm not painting something that's going to go in a display cabinet. And at this point, it doesn't matter if you spill the paint onto other bits and pieces of the uniforms, because we're going to go back and we're going to detail them later on anyway. Sticking with the idea of block colouring, I start on the horses themselves as well. These would have been riding bay horses, though in the 1815 campaign they were actually recruiting horses from all over the place, so you can do them in different colours. I just wanted to do them in bay horse because this is the 1st regiment, so they probably would have got the best horses anyway. Some of the further regiments down the line would have got the poorer horses. So this is Vallejo's beige brown, and I'm just painting again, all block painting those horses in just to ensure that I've got good coverage over all of it here. And using that beige brown, I also paint the wooden parts of the muskets, or carbines as they are, I suppose, cavalry carbines. And I'll also paint the hair as well, that you can see, because the shako is quite high on the back of the head. And I'll paint that in beige brown. Again, you can use whatever colours you want. I'm just doing this for speed and just to get these things on the table. The hair is not exactly a major noticeable part of the model anyway, but as you can see here, it's just a quick stripe across, and any untidiness here will be easily neated up just by painting the shako and the face as well, so don't worry too much about getting a bit of paint here and there. And then we're on to a part where we kind of want to be pretty neat with this, because this is black, so we don't really want to be going back over this, especially with some of the lighter colours that have very thin pigments. So you want to try to do this in one pass if you can. Doesn't matter too much if you can't. If you do make a little bit of a mess here and there, again, you can always go back and do these. So this would be for the shakos. This is for the horse tack as well, for all the various stirrups and strips and things that they have all over them, and also the cartridge box as well that the men are carrying. What I'm going to try to do here as well on the shako is actually just leave a tiny white stripe at the very top, because this is going to be painted red, and painting red over black is not impossible, but it is quite difficult, and I don't want to do too many passes as possible if I can with this. So as I say, I'm just working my way through the various bits and pieces of black. This I can also use to cut in to clean up where the hair got a little bit messy, or even where some of the other parts are as well that are slightly messy. So black has quite a lot of good uses, so I'm just getting it out of the way at this point. Flesh next, and for this I use tan yellow. This is a Vallejo paint. I like it much more than their sunny skin tone, and I just paint the faces. Because their hands already have white gloves on, there's no need to paint their hands as well. So this is a very quick quick run through all of the figures at once. And then we're moving on to white. So this is just basically neating up all the areas that I probably hit with paint previously, so the greens and things. But this is the saddles that they have. I think they're furry saddles. They also have white gloves as well. There's a few other bits and pieces of white, such as their straps, their chest straps and things as well for equipment. So again, just be as neat as you can. You can always go back with your original paints anyway and re-clean these. I also add a little bit of white here and there to some of the horses as well to break them up. And then we're on to the first of the really difficult paints, or probably the most difficult paint actually, and this is red. It's a very thin pigment red, so you can either have to go over it a few times or use a very light undercoat. In our case, I'm using the white here, especially on the saddles, and also the white line that I left around the top of the shako and on the pom-pom as well. However, if you do need your red to be a little bit brighter than what you're getting at this point, I would suggest using tan yellow as your base coat, because white can be a little bit stark, especially for an undercoat, whereas a tan yellow is a good strong colour, and I've found that red sits on it quite nicely. So this again is just being really neat, careful as you can, taking all those lines and those little bits of trim and bits and pieces of the cuffs and the collars and everything else that is red on those figures, and just trying to work your way around with a small enough brush just to get into all those nooks and crannies. Take your time with this, because it is worth it, and it's better than going back and having to repaint some of your original colours again. And then we start with some of the metal paints. So this is a mithril silver by Games Workshop, and I'm using this. It's an ancient bottle. You may not even be able to get this anymore, I'm not sure. But this I use on the cuirasses themselves and also on the scabbards as well, because they were silver. Very nice, easy, quick job just to paint the blades of the weapons, and as I say, those scabbards as well on their swords. We just move through this pretty quickly. And our second metallic paint is gunmetal, and this I'm just basically painting onto the muskets, the carbines there, you can see. Just a quick stripe down the barrel of it, and also just on some of the working flint parts as well. This will just make it stand out quite nicely against that green. And then it's gold or brass, really, for the brass plates on the front of those shakos, and also on the handles as well for the swords. The pommels, I suppose they're called, and I just want to work my way through those. Only basically two dots on the figure, on each figure, with a small brush in those areas. And with the actual figure pretty much finished off himself, the rider should I say, we are now on to just doing some bits and pieces on the horses. This is just to break up the shape of them. You could leave them all in that brown if you want, but I didn't want to. I wanted to darken the tails a little bit and the manes as well, and also just add a little bit of shading to their flanks and also on their legs and things like that. They call them socks. And because these are bay horses, I just did them in a very dark brown. I think this is German camo dark brown, but any dark brown would do really for this. As you can see here, I've just basically added it to the flanks as well of the figure, and also, as I say, the legs as well around the socks. I've also left some white as well at the bottom where their hooves are, and you could add white here or you could add other shades, whatever you really want. Just do them differently so they all look like different horses, otherwise they're going to look too uniform and they won't look particularly realistic. And then we're on to my favourite bit, and also Sonic Sledgehammer's favourite part as well. This is the Agrax Earthshade wash. This literally goes all over the horses and the riders. Liberally dab this everywhere. This is the best wash on the planet as far as I'm concerned. Just get it right into all those nooks and crannies. This will cover anything that you've missed at this point anyway, and also just add a really good shade underneath what we're going to do next, which is going to be the highlighting. At this point, the hard work is over. It's all downhill. So this is the highlighting. I literally go back to mostly the base colours. The red, I use a slightly brighter red because the red I used originally is a bit dark. But I'll just take that intermediate green and just go over some of the higher points on the green figures as well, ensuring that you've still got that shade and also the original paint underneath as well. Very simple, very easy job to do this. Then we're highlighting the skin, exactly the same. Use that tan yellow and literally just give it a quick dab over the face, picking up all the high points on the model itself. You don't have to go crazy with this, really, just to bring out that face and just make it pop, really. And then, as before, red is probably the trickiest one to highlight, but just because red is such a poor colour to paint in the first place. But I use quite a brightish red from Humbrol for this, and this just goes over the top of that Vallejo red with the agrax on it as well. And again, this really just does brighten the figure up, and it really brings attention to it. So it's well worth doing this bit slowly and just making sure that you're not making a mess of the rest of the paint that you've got to this point. But again, a tiny dab of red here and there on the already existing red is enough just to bring those colours really to the forefront. And my last highlight is white. So I'll just go back over where the saddles are, also on his straps and other bits and pieces of equipment and things. Again, just be worthwhile being careful with this. If you really wanted to, you could go crazy with the highlights. You could do a lot more than I do here, like doing the brass and that kind of thing as well, or silver or even. I don't bother because, as I say, I'm adhering to the 3-foot rule at this point. As long as you can see them on the tabletop, they're fine by me. I'm not looking at these any closer than I am at this point. This is the closest I will ever look at these figures when I'm painting them, when I'm playing with them. So I just do it enough that I can see that there are highlights and there's separate colours on those figures. And then the final stage to bring them all together really is just to start to base them. I've mounted these on small squares. I'm mounting these ones doubly. I've also got some mounted singly for casualty removal because I'm using these for sharp practice. However, you can base them how you want, but the way I do it is I use small pieces of plastic card cut to size like this. I think these are about 25mm by 25mm or thereabouts. I've rounded off the edges just to give them a little bit more organic shape, and then I'm using polyfiller or spangle, I think it's called in the US, just to fill in the area in between and to raise the base itself so there's no gaps. This is quite a nice, easy little job as well. I'll leave these to dry for 24 hours before moving on to the next stage of the base. And that stage is painting them. So I'll use Vallejo Flat Earth, which is my favourite named paint, and just basically paint these in once they're dry. As I say, leave them overnight for 24 hours and they'll be good enough and solid enough to be able to paint. And I just cover them in this Vallejo Brown Earth, or Flat Earth should I say, and these are then going to get covered in the next stage anyway. And then it's time to protect the figures. So I'll varnish them with some spray varnish. This is Winsor & Newton's professional artist matte varnish. Just put them in a box that's protective and make sure you've got enough air to breathe, and then give these a good spraying all over. This is the best varnish on the market in my opinion. It's well worth getting yourself some. It's a little bit more expensive than most varnishes, but it's well worth it because it's very useful. And then it's the actual final part of this. So this is just finishing off the bases. I'll use undiluted PVA glue. Just spread this about on the base and then cover them in static grass in flock. You can see I've got a box of it there. I think this is Javis's summer colour, but whatever is good for you. Probably 2mm size static grass, which is about perfect for 15mm figures. And I will, like I said, just basically paint the entire base here in the PVA so the grass will stick easily. You may notice as well here that I've also Agrax earth shaded the bases. I forgot to mention that, but that was just to give them a tiny bit of depth after I'd finished painting the Vallejo Flat Earth on them. A very simple job. I will also add grass tufts that I get from eBay and from various manufacturers as well in various sizes, again just to break up these bases once they're completed. A very simple job. A bit of glue, a little bit of sprinkle of the static grass. You could use a static grass applicator if you've got one. I don't have one, and I've never really needed one, to be honest, and that's them finished. And there we have it, the completed unit. So this is all 16 together with the trumpets here as well. As I say, these will be used in sharp practice. This is why they're mounted on 2 and individual bases as well. Nice and easy, just have to take those stages slowly. The Agrax really works for that shading, especially if you're using the highlights of the original colours as well on top. They really pop out when they're on the tabletop. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have done, please leave me a comment below. Do like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already, and also just check out my Patreon as well if you're that way inclined. So I will see you in the next video, and thanks again for watching.